be here for practice. And so we got here early to figure out how we put all the extra people. But it reminds me how fortunate we all are and how blessed we are to have actually made it here, to have actually taken up the practice. You know, it's very easy to have the intention and never quite get to it. So congratulations. And I'm so grateful for your companionship in this practice. Tonight I wanted to, I've been kind of turning in the direction of talking about precepts whenever I give a talk. And so tonight I wanted to talk about telling the truth, since I think that was what was taken up last Tuesday. And thinking about that, I remembered a TV show when I was young called To Tell the Truth. I don't know if anybody else remembers that show. But the way it went was there was a person of some notoriety and two imposters who would try to match wits with the four celebrity panelists. And the object of the game was to try to fool the panel into voting for the imposters as the person loved. This is before this massive influx of media, so we really know what everybody looks like, right? But this show was very popular, and it really tapped the concern about being found out. That we're not actually who we are claiming to be. It's really what it was playing with. And our fear of being seen for warts and all. So to cope with this, we may find ourselves fudging with the truth. And there's so many different ways to do this. So the precept of truth-telling is very complicated. It reaches into every aspect of our relationship with ourselves and our own life and all the people and the circumstances. We do things to cover up feeling like an imposter. How many of you have felt that way? Either in your job, in your relationship, in your parental role, whatever. But in Zen, we head right into that storm. We may not even realize it when we come to Zen. We think we're coming in to just get calmer. But what will happen as this practice deepens and ripens is that the precepts begin to work on us, even long before we are aware of precepts or we have any interest in them. So the precepts are the compass in this storm of attending to how we show up in the world in our presentation of self, to ourselves and to the world. More often than not, we don't blatantly lie, although I've blatantly lied. Has anybody else ever done that? It's bold, and there's something kind of liberating about it. But it's not a good policy, that's for sure. Sometimes you may not even know what's true. That's another aspect of this. This is a very complex world. Consciousness is very complicated. The world that we live in is filled with all kinds of competing calls on us, voices of the media and our own opinions, and all founded on the common delusion that we probably all share and are habituated into, and is usually unchallenged, that the self and the world are separate. That certainly is the way it seems. So much works against being able to speak truthfully. So we do well to root deeply in our inquiry about truth. It's ongoing. We approach the precepts by remembering the teachings of the two truths. I'm always coming back to this, the two truths, because Dharma can seem very confusing, because on one hand it's talking about the relative world, and on the other hand it's talking about the absolute world. And they encompass different aspects, different viewpoints on the same set that makes up our life, the same conditions. So the relative truth is based on the view that I am separate from the world, and the world is out there. There's a me in here and a you out there. Right now I see a bunch of yous out there in that way. But during Zazen, that was not the experience. But there is an existential truth to the fact that we are individual. We are separate in that way. We're all unique in our many particulars. We each have our own experience that determines what we make of the world. We're each formed by karmic conditions that are very distinct to us. Family history, habits, beliefs, values, biology, biological, given biologically, and our thoughts, which seem all we have access to is the separate thoughts, but at times actually we probably have the same thoughts going on. And if you're close to somebody, you may find that you both start to say the same thing at the same time. That certainly has been my experience. So on the one level, we're separate, and this can lead us to argue about what's true. That experience of being with somebody that you're close to, and they say to you, yeah, but you said that. You said, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. You know that experience? It's so frustrating. But there's no way to sort out the truth in an argument that is structured like that. The yes, you did, and no, I didn't structure. The truth lies outside of this construction, beyond this narrowing construction. There's a lot more to it than yes and no. Somebody thinks I said something that is their experience, which I don't doubt. I didn't say it, I don't doubt that. I would never say that. And yet, here we are. So there's always more to every moment, any experience, any impression that lies beyond the opposites, beyond opposition, beyond separation. This is the intimate truth, is outside of opposites, beyond what we choose or reject, or accept or deny, or like or dislike. And that's pointing to the truth, the absolute truth, in the two truths. I like and I don't like is the truth. There are preferences. We all have preferences. This is not from a critical standpoint. This is just descriptive. We all have preferences. There's no problem with preferences, but it's important to recognize them. Same with opinions. It's important to recognize the energy in opinion. When we practice, we see through our preferences and habits directly to what is. We recognize as they are, as it is. Truth-telling, as described by the Buddha, sounds rather more easy than what I've been talking about, and less complicated. But it is well-founded and important to reflect on. He taught abandoning false speech. She abstains from false speech. I'm inserting the she. He abstains from false speech, speaks truth, adheres to truth, is trustworthy and reliable, one who is no deceiver of the world. So when we are really committed to speaking truthfully, we become trustworthy, and we don't misrepresent our intention or how we're going to participate in something. One who is no deceiver of the world. This precept is our guide to action and describes a way that we check in with ourselves in how we talk, which is to tell the truth. This requires us to know ourselves and to be able to distinguish the truth. What is so, and also as opposed to what I would like to be so. So the more fully we know ourselves, the more we understand where we stand in relation to everything. So we can distinguish the truth about ourselves, and we get familiar with the whole range of our inner voices. All of our inner voices, because they determine how we experience. Voices, I'll name a few: the inner critic, the voice of self-loathing, which often is part of what is in anybody who comes to Zen practice. I mean, I think it's often the case. The voice of the guilty child, or the braggart, the inflated self. I can do anything. Or, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. So these are a couple of the examples. Practicing with this precept includes paying attention and recognizing our voices that we act from. It's something that really, in Sanzen earlier today with one of the avid distance people, he said he just realized who was in charge of so many of his reactions to things and the ways that he spoke to people. He had never seen that before, in spite of years of therapy. And it's so simple when we get really aware, because there's even a sensation in the body. There's always a sensation in the body that cues us, that we get much more attuned to with a practice of asana. So recognizing our various voices that we're acting from: anger, anxiety, love, kindness. When I get caught sometimes in some kind of attitude, and I'm not sure what to do, how to respond differently, I remember that line from the Tennessee Williams play, treating somebody with the kindness of a stranger. And I go back to kindness, just be kind. So that's a voice. Speaking the truth, what voice is that? That's part of this koan, this precept koan. When is the voice that's got you a deceiving voice, trying to make it seem that you're someone else, or that you are other than you are? Or that will give you an advantage over somebody else, that reinforces some notion of what you think would be more desirable, or what will help you win. So this is all part of what we get so much more sensitized to in our own thought stream, feeling stream. Abandoning false speech leads to being trustworthy and reliable, not committing to something that we are actually not available for. Buddha includes those qualities in his list: trustworthy and reliable. So I have an old friend who was always late. I couldn't rely on him to show up when he said he would. And when he looked into what that was all about for him, he realized the childhood root. of having to be so responsible all the time for his younger siblings, because their parents were always drunk, and he was the responsible one, even when he was 8 and 10. So he didn't learn how to pay attention to his own needs and what his own intentions were. And then so many years later, he was still not, he was just waking up to it. So knowing what motivates us and how it came about is part of being able to tell the truth. Not continuing to be motivated by conditions that are no longer relevant to our present situation. And being aware of when we're triggered back into them. Nakagawa Soen Mushin said about this precept, don't use rootless words. In other words, root in the immediate direct conditions truthfully. This is another way of saying to be aware of what motivates your speech and actions. What is your intention? What is the intention of what you're saying? Is it true? Knowing your heart mind. And let your words and actions come from the way it is. As with all precepts, we follow them not to be good Zen practitioners, not to be good children, not to be something that we're not. Now, the precept is not from the view that false speech is wrong, but that it's a basis for suffering and anxiety, which is what the Buddha said this practice is all about, is getting to the root of suffering and making different choices that we get freer to make. Not telling the truth today has consequences. It creates fear tomorrow, and ongoingly, and confusion, and deception, and avoidance, and stress, and delusion. Because when we depart from reality long enough, we can forget that we're lying. We're seeing this acted out on the national stage, and the havoc that it's creating. Or we lose track of our lives, and you can become really confused and messed up socially. So speech harms by destroying trust in ourselves. First of all, when we're out of integrity, we cannot relax and feel easy and be happy. And it also disrupts the community irretrievably. And look at what has been wrought by the deception of the people in charge of control. So we investigate, why did I lie? Or why did I misrepresent? And we do that with a feeling of compassion rather than blame, just to understand and learn about ourselves. We do that because we dedicate to being harmonious, having a harmonious social world. And we think that not saying the truth might help with harmony. And sometimes in families with a lot of conflict, somebody will just go along with anything, just to keep it from exploding. Fear is another reason why we don't tell the truth. And to protect, and sometimes lightly. It's important not to say what's going on, because there can be a real threat. So that's an attempt to prevent harm, which is the first of the pure precepts. But it has its consequences also. So self-protection, self-promotion, self-involvement or self-centeredness are all the motivations And there are so many varieties of untruth. So part of working with this precept is we really notice them as they are manifesting: lies, perjury, fibbing, telling tall stories, when that's not what you're all doing around a campfire. Being economical with the truth. Propaganda, which is really evil. It's intentional, and it's purely manipulative. Sham, pretense, pretend, misrepresent, con, fraud, maintaining a facade, cheating, exaggerating. Anybody here ever exaggerate? Yesterday at the open house, we had hundreds of people. There were lots, but I don't think there were hundreds. Aiken Roshi points out that truth and falsity can come through words and through silence. So this is another part of this telling the truth. You're urged not to be complicit with silence in relation to false speech or harmful speech. This is one of the challenges we've all been faced with a lot in recent times at the national level and locally, with all the hate, the acting out of hate. How do we not be complicit? How do we speak up? Thus, we're cautioned, and these are his Aiken Roshi's words, we're cautioned to be loyal to the essence, inspired by living according to our Buddha nature. And this brings us back once again to the two truths. We talk about the relative truth of what happened, who did what resulted, and all that conditioned actions have consequences. So we're very aware in the relative truth of all the consequences for any action, or we're attuned to them, short-term and long-term. There's this phrase I've been hearing a lot: so-and-so plays the long game. Well, we as Zen practitioners are playing the long game. We're all longing to be done with deception and be able to live thoroughly in what is actual, in a way that is kind and generous. So this larger view, the absolute view, is one and the same with all conditioned actions and speech. That's how we can understand this phrase that Aiken uses, inspired by Buddha nature. When we're inspired by Buddha nature, we keep the precepts. We uphold the precepts. We remember them. We're guided by them. When we are attuned to this view of no separation from momentary conditions, right here and now is where Buddha lives. These conditions arise together with all and comprise all experience, impermanent, interdependently arising, and not fixed, always having consequences. When we lose track of this, we suffer, and sow seeds for further suffering. So when this is clear, then the various social and psychological virtues of truth-telling are illumined. Those are Aiken's words. Self-deception, deception of others, cheating, gossip, and carelessness with language are all disloyal to the peace in the heart of hearts. Words expressive of that peace are true. Silence expressive of that peace is true. How true is the silence in the Zen? How true is the silence in Zazen? That's really an instruction for Zazen, to sit here truly silent. And notice what is chattering away. And keep noticing that. And listen into whatever is silent in there. So really in Zazen, we're attuning to, we're opening to, we're receptive to true deep stillness and silence. Once we have that experience, it helps us a lot. We know this possibility for us, and that it's always present, always right here and there. The truth is ready to harvest, is what Aiken said. The truth is ready to harvest. Just look, right here. Just this is our guide. Dogen Zenji said, self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. Self-nature is, so our Buddha nature is inconceivably. We cannot conceive of it. It is not something we think. It's not a thing. It's not an object. Wondrous because we don't know. We wonder at things that we do not encompass and know and hold. In the inexplicable Dharma, not expounding a word is called not lying. So Dogen's really putting it to us. Not expounding a word is called not lying. So this is the absolute layer of truth-telling. He's emphasizing here that purest form of truth-telling is not mistaking words about for the direct life that emerges right here in its own way, in its own specific way. It's always emerging specifically in specific ways every moment. There's always form of some sort. Wordlessly, words point, they are not life itself. Kind of. That's an absolute statement, but it's not always true. But what if you're writing a poem? Or you're having a poetic moment. So all the many forms and qualities of non-truth-telling are distortions of what is. Bold lies, self-promotion, exaggeration, omission or withholding information. After a while, you forget that you're lying. And your mind becomes diluted and confused. So not lying means no complicity with lies, your own or anyone else's. There's also a timeliness factor to truth-telling. Buddha talks about it. He says, we speak at the right time, speak what is fact, speak on what is good, speak on what is dharma, and is discipline. At the right time, she speaks such words as are worth recording, reasonable, moderate, and beneficial. Notice the word moderate in here, which is interesting. It's pointing to, what about extreme speech? What about extreme speech? How might that be something to be aware of in your own habits? I think I catch myself in extreme speech at times, and I don't think it's beneficial. So I look at it, and I hope that you do too. If that's an issue, some people are much less extreme in the way they express themselves. There are wrong times to tell the truth. The Buddha said that you should not speak when what you have to say is false, or harms. And what you have to say is false but does not harm. That can happen, you know. Or what you have to say is true and harms. That can happen. Talking about what someone else said about that person. I mean, there are lots of ways to harm and to bring difficulty and conflict into situations, even if you're telling the truth. If what you have to say is true and harmless, even then you should wait for the right time. The right time to deliver your message skillfully, with kindness and tact, is when you feel grounded and alert, not when you're all stirred up. When you're not afraid of alienating the other person, and when you feel that the other person can receive what you have to say, even if it is painful to hear. And there are times when we need feedback. It's one of the things that in Sangha we do. We give feedback. And hopefully do it skillfully so that, one, it can be heard, two, it can be used, and three, it does not harm the connection. So distinguishing between harmful and hurtful is another study in the study of this precept. It takes a lot of finesse, delicacy, subtlety. So the right words at the right time, in the right measure. The precept not to lie is important for community life. It's essential. While ethical transgressions can involve any of the precepts, many of these difficulties wouldn't arise if it weren't for the element of deceit. Lying to oneself, to another, or to one's community obscures the nature of reality, the reality that you share, and hinders us in our intention to practice the Bodhisattva mind. Open and direct communication is the ground for creating and sustaining an atmosphere of trust between us as a group. You can't tell the truth by yourself. It's another thing we can't do, secondly. You have to work it out with others. Truth cannot be heard when I am here and you are out there. We must each take responsibility for telling the truth and listening carefully. This is how precepts are lived fully in our Sangha practice. So it is my wish that there may be something in all of this that came forward about this precept that you hadn't considered, but it's hugely dimensional, as is every precept. So these are some of the dimensions to be considered. Thank you. Here's my service.